Hi, so today I want to talk a little bit about cross-references and counters with Print CSS. And yeah, for that I went to printcss.live again, because there we will try the counters together and then also making some cross-references with target counter and the target counters function. The first thing I would do is actually remove the standard sample again and put some default page on which we try. So let's remove the CSS and also the HTML, and here I have some dummy text generator, and I actually take the kitchen sink example, which offers, as you see here, in H1 some paragraphs, H2 unordered list, some quotes, yeah, in general some HTML text. So if we paste it here and let's render with EasyPrint, instead of going for the live preview, we see here our document. And actually the most basic counter you can have is the predefined page and pages counter, which show you the current page number and the total. So for that, let's add a few more paragraphs into our HTML, so we actually get more than one page. So now we see we have two pages here, and to show you the page counter and the pages counter, let's define our page with the add page rule, and then let's add the count on the bottom. Let's say bottom center margin box. So this will be the margin box below here in the middle. And to see this counters, we need the content property, and on the content property we can say counter, and then we need to pass the counter name. So for example page, that will give us the current page. So in this case we have page 1 and page 2. If we want the total, we can extend this. Let's first put some divider and add another counter with the pages. Both of these counters are set by default in any of these rendering tools. So you see 2 by 2 and page 1 of 2. Additionally to these predefined counters, you can also define counters for yourself. Let's say if you want a chapter counter for all headings of the level 1. So right now we have only one of these. So let's maybe add another one by just duplicating the whole thing. And we have our first and here our second H1 header. We have actually 3 pages now. You see 3 of 3, 2 of 3, and 1 of 3. So what we need to do now is, first we need to initialize our counter, and we can do that with a counter reset. So what we can do here, simply in the document, we could say counter reset. Let's do that maybe on the body counter reset, and we call it chapters. And then on each H1 we would need to increment the counter. So for that there's the property counter increment, and we simply say we want to increment chapters. So for now, when we would render this, nothing will happen because we don't show the counter anywhere like we show the page and the pages. So what we need to do is, let's show the chapter somewhere, and for that we can use the pseudo element before the h1, and again use the content property and say counter, and we want the chapters counter, and maybe behind that a space. So then we see we have the chapter 1 and we have the chapter 2. So this counter reset actually initializes the counter with the value of 0, and the increment by default increments by 1. If you want to increment the counter, for example by 2, what you can do is pass a second parameter here, the 2, and if you render that, you would start with 2, so the initial value is 0, we add 2, and then you would have 4 here, because we add another 2. Similar to that, you can initialize your counter not with a 0, but with a certain value, for example also 2, same way, simply passing it as a second parameter. And if we render that, we see we start with 4, because initially we have 2, we add 2, we have the first heading with 4, and then we come to 6. So this is how you can basically define the counter, and what is also possible is to decrease. So we could say a -2 as an increment, and if we render that, as we have the initial value of 2, our first heading will have a 0, and the second heading actually a -2, because we again subtract 2 from it. So in this way we could count down, let's say -1, and then if we render this, we have 1 and 0. And if we have 3, same way, we have 2 and 1. So in this way you can work with the normal counter. And now to actually, let's say we remove these additional values, so we do the default behavior, initialize with 0 and increment by 1. So we have our chapter 2 and we have our chapter 1. So now let's say we want this whole thing presented in a table of contents, for example. So we would need, or we would go to our HTML, and before our content starts we would have some table of contents, TOC, and in here I would define now 2 links to these different chapters, and for that we say here we have the HTML ipsum presents, and close that. And now let's say this is linking with a text anchor to chapter 1, or let's call it chapter 1 like this, and we give this h1 the ID chapter 1. So now what you can do is, when we render this, you'll simply see our ipsum presents, and it actually links already to this chapter, but it doesn't show us the chapter number. So what we can do is, we can use a target counter for this to get the actual number, or the actual count of the counter, the actual value at the place where this chapter 1 is being used. So for that, what we will do is, in here, let's give that maybe also a class, and now in here we can say on our TOC class we want maybe before that again we want the content to be from a counter, so we do the target counter function and we pass first of all from where we want it, so we want it from the attribute ref, and then what do we want? We want the chapters counter. So if you render this, you will see the one here, and again let's add some space behind and in front, let's say chapter number, and then the one, and then here let's say that's the title. So we see chapter number 1 title and then our title, both actually links to the chapter. The same thing we can do now for the second chapter, chapter number 2, and all we need to do is give our second H1 the ID chapter 2. To make it look a little better, let's say here our TOC is display block and not inline. So doing that we have it in a new row and it's linking to the chapter 2. Additionally, for table of contents, what we can do is we can of course also show the page number at the current link, or at the current heading, better said. So you could say chapter number and page number, take the same code, we just need to put this in quotes, so the page number, not the target counter, and what is behind we also need to put in quotes again. And here instead of chapters we take page, so the default counter. So you see now the first chapter is on page number 1, the second one should be, and it is on page number 2. Let's see if that's really working by going back here and adding some more content on the first page. So then actually you will see it is still on number 2. So let's put even more content. Now I'm putting content in the wrong area, so maybe you should put the content here and then it will work. So now we have 6 pages in total, and it still starts on the I'm still at chapter 2. Maybe I should read before I'm pasting, so let's remove it here and actually put it in the chapter 1. So now we see the chapter 2 starts at the page number 4, and if we go there we see 3 of 8 and 4 of 8, and if we go up we see that also in the PDF viewer, so we are on the 4th page here. So in this way you of course would auto generate this and your chapters, so you can automatically generate these IDs and then create a table of contents with that. Additionally to this single counter, you can also have nested counters. So if we remove the current HTML and also our table of contents. Let's remove the text here. And what we will do is, from here, let's copy this unordered list. First render simply that list, and we will have our page number below as before. Now let me add some more list items and actually nest them also. So here we will add another list within the list, and we will see it looks like this. And the same thing we do somewhere below here, let's say. And additionally in here we nested even one level more, so we put another one in here. So now if you want to put a counter here, what we would do is we first need to define, so initialize our counter again. Let's try to do that on the UL element. So you would say counter reset list number, and then maybe also say list style type none, and we render that again. We see no list style type, and of course we don't see any counter yet. We didn't do anything with it yet. But on the lists elements, what we do now is we do the counter increment, and we increment this counter by 1. Again, see nothing, and what we do, same as with the heading, on the pseudo element before, we will use the content property to show our counter list number, and behind that let's put a dot and a space. So now what we see is we have 1, 1, and as each UL element resets the counter, we have 1, 1 here, but actually here you see outside it keeps going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then again 1, 1, 1, 1. So instead of the counter method, what we can call here is counters, so with the S behind, and pass a second parameter here, and the second parameter is actually the divider between the numbers. What I mean with that, you'll see it in a second. We see here now we have 2, and then 2.1, 2.2, and under 6 we have 6.1, 6.2, and 6.2.1, 6.2.2. So in this way we can get all the numbers for this count in the different levels and put them together. So I remove the last one and maybe make it like this, and that we see the number clearer. Let me make that bold. And now let's say we want to get the counter value of this element. So what we can do is the same as we did before. So this is actually this element here. Let's give it some ID. So let's say here marker, for example, and go back in here, and first let me style that with a color red and font weight bold. So in this way you will just see it highlighted here, and actually we see all the sub elements also highlighted because they are within this element, can do is, again, we define first, let's define an element here which links to this marker, and say list number is, and now again let's give this a class. We could also directly style the a tag, but yeah, class is maybe better. Tell me the number, and we go here, and similar to before, what we do is, instead of using a pseudo element before, I will use after now, because I wanted list number is, and then it should print 6.2. So what we'll do here is again the content property target counter, and as we do it up here with the counters, the same thing we do here, so target counters. The attribute we want is again the half. We want the list number, and our separator between the different nested counter values should be the dot. And before that, let's add this. So in that way we get 6.2, which is also correct. We put the marker on this value. If we move the marker ID, for example here, then we should get 6.2.2. And we get that correctly. Again, we could move it somewhere else. And you see it's 4, and then the list number is 4. And to put it again to some nested number, let's put it here. And we get the 6.2.1. You actually can call the target counter here, but then also you need to remove the last parameter, and then you get actually the 1, because you will get the last value. So on this element itself it's the 1, the other 2 are inherited more or less from here and here. So with the counters and the divider, which can be basically anything, you can also put a $sign in here. Then we get $6 to $1. Then actually when we look at the support for this, we see typeset can put the counters but doesn't output the target counter functions value. PrintCSS has a problem with this nested counters. Prints does it correctly, and PDF Reactor does it correctly too. Prints actually has another nice feature. You can add that in any counter. You can put, instead of this divider, you can put symbols in there. So you can say symbols, and then you can put some symbols like this. And you should know it's not working. Maybe I'm mixing something up here. I guess that was only on the counter property. Let's see. Symbols, and then no, Okay, forget what I said. That was some mix-up. But in general, you see what's possible with the counter and target counters and how they actually work. Okay, then yeah, that's more or less what I wanted to show you today. So you saw the single counter, the nested counters, and how to retrieve the values with the target counter and target counters method. Additionally to that, I want to show you a nice tool if you want to read your online news articles as a nice PDF and soon also printed. And this is Screen Break. So if you look at the Screen Break website, myscreenbreak.com, it's basically turning your articles into books, and soon that will be also printable. So I created an account here, and you can actually store up to 100 articles, create 20 collections, so basically multiple articles in one collection, and you can download up to 300 times right now in their beta. And what I took, for example, was this article of a German online newspaper about Corona, as most of the news articles nowadays. And you see this article here, and with the browser extension you can save that within their within your repository here, and then you can download a PDF of that. So here you have then the download button, you have add to a collection if you want to put multiple articles together in one PDF, and if you download that, you see a quite nice PDF version of your article. So this is looking pretty good, and in that way you can save any article for reading later. So if I go here again, for example, and take any other article, let's take this news update, I can use the browser extension to save this article. The website was still loading, it's taking some time. But you see lots of ads on this website which first need to get blocked. So if I download this PDF, then you see again a very nice looking PDF of this article. And now when I go back to my articles and refresh here, I have both of them, and I can add them to a collection. Okay, let's create a new collection here. News. And go back to my articles. Add this one to news. Sorry. Below I can just create a new one. Just need to click here and it's added. And we go to collections, we see there are 2 articles in there, and I can download. The printing function is not there yet, but it's announced for end of the year. And here, if I'm downloading, you will see a nice table of contents, so page 2, page 5, QR code, the title, and the source with the author. So you can click here, but we can also just scroll down. We see the first article, and we see the second article in a nice PDF format. So if you want to check that also out, just go to myscreenbreak.com and get the browser extension and a free account, and then you can also create these PDF versions of the articles you like to read. Okay, that was basically all I wanted to show you today. I hope you liked it, and yeah, see you soon with some other Print CSS related topics. Bye.